Hey guys, good afternoon. It's Tuesday, March 16th, 2021, and we're just having a quick look at how Ontario currently looks for the 2022 provincial election. And I guess first question is why are we doing this? Because, the election is a year away. And I guess it's the last thing on everyone's mind right now, thinking about COVID and everything and what's going on with the response to that. But nevertheless, it would be fun to, I think, first of all, just take a look at how the split is between how Ontario votes versus the rest of Canada, because there is a relationship. A lot of people do know that the way Ontario votes federally is often the opposite of how they vote provincially. And the other thing is just to check back in a year for fun and see if these numbers have changed a little bit. Okay, so we'll just do an overview quickly of how it looks popular vote-wise for all of Canada. Super quick, so we'll go Canada here, and we'll get the breakdown from Ontario out of this. So it hasn't really moved too much since the COVID response. Liberals were a bit higher from the initial response, but it seems with the We charity scandal last year, they've come back to earth a little bit more. There's only a difference of about 5 points between the two. Nevertheless, seat-wise, this puts the Liberals well within striking distance of majority government. Conservatives don't really have a shot at a majority either way. This is the interesting thing, too, is that depending on when the federal election happens, we might have the provincial one in Ontario and the federal one happen in the same year. We might see a federal election at the end of this year. I think that all depends on how well the vaccine response goes to. It's truly an unprecedented time because for sure it'd be a guarantee that this year, if not last year, would have been the year for an election under a minority government like this. But nevertheless, let's take a look at how Ontario matches to this pattern. So if we go, let's see here. Here we go, regional distribution. So we go into regional distribution here. You can see Ontario, Liberals have that lead 41 to 32. This is very typical to what was the norm in 2019. It might be a bit higher than what it was in 2019. We look at the results here for 2019 and you can tell Ontario, particularly GTA, super Liberal. There's a few ridings here. I think this is Thornhill would be the closest one to Toronto. Would be the nice blue one there. Nice little blue one here. Yeah, here we go, Toronto Metro. And this is Newmarket Aurora. I believe this one of these was a Liberal actually who flipped, I think. So you can see that Liberals overall on the federal level have a very good grip on the GTA, and that's really what guarantees them the most seats in government most of the time is their grip on Ontario and to an extent Quebec. But that's a whole other fun story. Anywho, 2018, this is the Ontario map. And we could obviously see here that the Liberal stronghold of Toronto was no more. And very clearly the NDP took over in the downtown. But what we see uptown towards this line here, it's Steeles Avenue. So this is all part of Toronto here. Number 70, this is Doug Ford's riding. Nevertheless, these are all pretty deep blue, you could say. And you can see the Conservatives made a good amount of inroads in the city, whereas the downtown really did convert to NDP support. One in particular that's very interesting is Toronto Centre. That went even more NDP than usual, and usually that's it's a strong Liberal riding, I think, on the federal level, so that'll be interesting to talk about. Okay, so what we got to talk about with Ontario, though, is just how the numbers are basically the reverse of what we have in the federal. Because if we look at Ontario here, we got 43% for the Conservatives. And what's very concerning is that we got a vote split here between the Liberals and the NDP. Liberals barely running a point higher than the NDP. If you add these two together, and this is the other thing too, there's a big Green vote here. And usually attribute, whenever the Green Party does really well, usually there's weakness in the other two parties, I would say. Nobody's really satisfied. What you could say is that left-wingers in general, obviously before the pandemic, very upset with Doug Ford. That hasn't really changed, but where they choose to put their support, though, is very clearly split here. The Green Party garnering that much support is usually a bad sign, even though these three parties together would be more than 50% of the vote. The way this vote is distributed pretty much guarantees that Doug Ford, even with his unpopularity with a lot of Ontarians on the left already because before COVID, and on the right, you could say, because he did have a lot of restrictions, and people from a business perspective did not appreciate the constantly shifting restrictions, and people on the left probably don't appreciate the fact that the COVID vaccine response has been a bit stuttered. There's a lot of confusing information just because instead of the province administering it themselves, they're leaving it up to the municipal health regions. So there's some mixed information there. Plenty of fodder for the Liberals and NDP to go after the Conservatives on that. But nevertheless, people don't like Doug Ford, but it seems they don't like the other two parties that much either. And so Doug Ford is pretty much guaranteed to get 83, 84 seats, well above the majority he needs. See there. 99.2% chance. So what we could say here is what will have to change necessarily. What are these two parties going to have to do in order to catch up to the PCs and make it interesting for next year? So we need a regional breakdown. We've got to start looking at some of the ridings where the NDP would need to really surge and the Liberals would have to take back in order to become as competitive. And so let's take a look. So start off with Toronto here. So obviously the Liberals still have a couple seats in Toronto. Kathleen Wynne, Michael Couteau, I believe this is Mitzi Hunter. And down here in downtown Toronto, it's gone securely NDP. The question is here, though, is the percentages. The regional breakdown here is that Toronto overall, let's go to regional distribution here. Toronto is overall voting PC. They're the majority party here. And this is the real area of concern, I would say, for Liberals and NDP, is that, there's no way either of these two left-wing parties make it into government without having Toronto. And nevertheless, the 905. You can see the 905 distribution here for the NDP is it's not that great. Clearly, the Conservatives split up the difference. There's a lot of gains here, I believe. 63, that should be Jagmeet Singh's brother. Nevertheless, a lot of these ridings out here, we can look at 2014 and see where the NDP were successful. I believe, so it's basically the same areas in the GTA where they were successful. So that must be, it's got to be Oshawa, I think, there, and this little part of Brampton here, and a couple ridings in Toronto. I think that's Parkdale High Park. Nevertheless, NDP didn't make a lot of big inroads in the 905 like Liberals had when they had government. See here, this is a domination of Toronto here, along with a lot of the 905. And this is a very similar distribution to how it turned out federally, I would say, last two times, with Thornhill always staying blue, but the rest of it going quite red indeed. And we can look at Canada GTA. This is still true even in an election where Liberals won a minority. They pretty much cleaned up all of Toronto and most of the 905. So NDP, they want any gains here, they got to win pretty much what the Liberals have won in Toronto, and then also make some serious inroads into these PC ridings up here. We can also look, so these are the strong points as well as the NDP. We can see Hamilton, Windsor, all these areas, reliably NDP. They're going to have to get out of these main cities and really get into some of these Southern Ontario ridings. You can see outside Kitchener-Waterloo, margin was a bit thinner there. Important swing ridings to be aware of in this map. I believe this is Peterborough or this is Peterborough. Nevertheless, Peterborough is always an important swing riding. Federally, it's considered a bellwether, and I would say provincially as well. PC support. You would want to see the NDP breaking out in some of these areas, and you can see they've got a good hold up here in Northern Ontario. Liberals are able to keep one up there, but the NDP usually do well up there, and they need to do a lot better down here, I would say. And a lot of these, they just barely took Kingston here. They'd have to break into Ottawa. Ottawa's been very reliably Liberal, and it still was during the last election. when they even got decimated. I think there's just as many seats in Toronto as there are Ottawa for Liberals. Nevertheless, NDP got to make a big inroads pretty much all over the 905, pretty much up north here. This one was interesting to me. This is Sault Ste. Marie down here. Got probably a better zoom in of it here, but that's a riding that was Liberal for a while and then went PC, and I think that's kind of the bellwether that we're looking at, because federally that's still a Liberal riding. So yeah, you can see all around it is NDP, but somehow this particular riding went Conservative. It would have to be places like this in Northern Ontario that Sudbury went NDP, if they can get Sault Ste. Marie, if they can get some of these, this riding out here, which I guess is Rainy River, if they can get those in the NDP column, as well as more of these GTA ridings, then they would have a better shot at government. Now, Liberals, it's interesting thing with the Liberals, I think, because the Liberals, if we look at the past, they had a better chance, much better chance. Look at this, odds of winning the most seats. Even this year, the start of 2020, they had a 90% chance, apparently, of winning the most seats. I'm not sure if that was, it seems that once they elected a leader in Stephen Del Duca, their numbers have pretty much gone back down, and make of that as you will, but, the Liberals, this is also the power of incumbency here. So the Liberals, not only would they have to make up a big part of the popular vote, but also they got to basically beat the odds in terms of incumbency. Because if we look at these ridings here, I would say, a lot of these ridings were Liberal in the past, but these NDP and Conservative members, they now have the advantage of incumbency going in, and the Liberals will really have to deliver quite a platform, or some things will have to seriously go wrong with the rollout campaign, I would think, in order for some of these blue ridings to flip red. I think there's a better chance of some of these right now flipping orange just because of the incumbency, but we have to talk about how effective the Liberals put their campaign forward, because the Liberals historically have a better chance of winning. Barrie, for example, Barrie's a good example of a riding that was Liberal the past couple cycles but has since gone Conservative. This is 2014 data here, so you can see the Liberals were able to make big wins outside Hamilton. That area is now Conservative. Barrie there. You got Northumberland, Kingston, all of East. So this good part of Eastern Ontario here, this part's now reliably Conservative. But, Liberals were able to win there, and that's what made the difference in terms of government. But I guess the thing is the Liberals have a better chance of winning these PC areas in Southern Ontario, and they have less of a shot. I would say if they want to really make a comeback, they're going to have to make some wins definitely around Hamilton. Right now, it's just a PC-NDP divide. Niagara Falls, for example, too. We can look at 2014. There was, I believe, St. Catharines went Liberal, so that's something that they would have to look at now. This is very weak NDP territory, it looks like, up there. So these are the areas where the Liberals will have to flip it back, not just in the NDP, but from the Conservatives as well. London was at least downtown London looked Liberal, but it seems London, much like Hamilton, is very much an NDP strong suit, as well as Windsor. But if we look at the results for Windsor, the NDP actually did worse in 2018 than they did in 2014. They really locked it up in 2014. So perhaps that shows some support slipping. That seems to be a part of the country where voters don't really vote Liberal. They go between Conservative and NDP. So we're going to have to see a year from now where all these things are. But basically, it's a very high road, or a very high hill for either the Liberals or the NDP to climb. I think the NDP, just by being incumbents, are in a better position to make the most out of this situation than the Liberals. The Liberals, somehow they were doing a lot better with no leader now than their current leader, and they're going to have to take, the Green Party's going to have to lose their riding in Guelph, which I think is unlikely. It seems Mike Schreiner's a very popular politician, and we just have to get to the conclusion here that right now, Conservatives are leading in all districts of the province. They're leading in all these districts. They're even leading in Hamilton by a point over the NDP, and this is probably their strongest area. Southwestern Ontario, you see the NDP control Windsor, but the rest of it is just a knockout for the Conservatives. So there's no there's no real worries here for the PCs at all, even though, and like this is the thing, is like, you could say a lot of people don't like Doug Ford's governing style, and they didn't like it for years before, but clearly the regional breakdowns are split in a sense between Liberals and NDP that make it basically impossible at this point for him to lose. So that's my conclusion for now, and I think maybe a year from now, unless anything drastic changes, I will eat my words, but I think Doug Ford is well on his way to winning another majority term in Ontario. Thanks so much for listening.